notice.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Welcome everyone. My name is Dana Howarth. I'm the program director for the New Mexico Caregivers Coalition. I see lots of familiar names and faces, but I also see lots of new faces. So welcome to anyone that's joining us for the first time, and welcome back to anyone who's returning. We always appreciate seeing folks come back and meeting new folks as well. So I'm with the New Mexico Caregivers Coalition. We're a nonprofit here in New Mexico that was created in 2009 to provide a voice for family and paid professional care workers throughout the state. We do work with several folks from Arizona too. I know a bunch of you are out visiting and joining our classes from Arizona as well. Much of the work we do includes providing trainings and presentations such as this one to reach family caregivers, paid caregivers, care recipients, and providing information as best as we can to folks in our local area and across the state, and actually across the United States. Since we've been able to go virtual with Zoom, we're even reaching folks in different states, which has been really great. Today's presentation is a guest presentation on grief and loss with our guest presenter, Cindy Anderson, and I'm going to pass it on to her so she can have most of the hour to share with you. So Cindy.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and it's good to see so many people that have come to the presentation. I don't know how you felt about the topic when you saw that it was being offered, but I understand there were several requests for this topic, and I think it's really an important one anytime, but I think it's especially important right now in the time of this pandemic, and we're losing a lot of people. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. I've got a PowerPoint. I think there will be times when I'm going to ask for people to make comments or responses. If you feel comfortable doing that, I think you could just unmute yourself and do that. If you prefer, you can write something in the chat, and my other facilitators here are going to try to monitor that, and they'll interrupt and say, hey, we've got several responses in chat. So this is actually my first time doing a presentation online. I run meetings, so be patient with me if I'm bumble around a bit, but basically just I like a presentation where I've got interaction, comments. It just leads to the richness of this. So I just want to say too that if any of you are facing recent grief, you know, this may bring up feelings for you, and that's really okay. I'm okay if somebody is starting to cry or whatever during session. It's up to you how you feel. If you feel like you need to leave and come back in later, that's fine. Just be comfortable, basically. But just you know, forewarning, this is not necessarily an easy topic. So I just want to give you the space to, you know, have feelings as we talk about the various aspects of grief. All right, let me give this a try to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right. So this is just the opening page here. I should mention who I am, I guess. My name is Cindy Anderson, and I'm Executive Director of PeopleWorks New Mexico. We've had a dementia caregiver program in the past. We've specialized in older adults. I founded the agency in 2009, and our home base is in Rio Rancho. So we've been around a few years, and we do provide the counseling sessions, and we have a caregiver support group, and we have a mindfulness meditation group, and we also have a pain management group that are all online going on right now. So if any of you are interested, you could contact PeopleWorks or go on to our website. I've been a social worker, oh my goodness, I think it's been about 35 years. So lots of experience. You know, I'm always learning. I don't want ever to feel like, you know, I know it all, especially in a topic like this, where, you know, people have such individual experiences with grief. But let's get started. So what is grief? Very broadly defined, it's just a reaction to a loss. And it's usually thought of as a reaction to a death, usually a death of a human person. But yeah, so it's just that loss, usually the death part. There are other losses, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what do we experience when we have had a loss, say a loss of a family member or a friend, somebody close to us? Well, we may experience both emotions and we may experience body reactions. So there's usually an overwhelming sadness. That's kind of understood. We are feeling sad, and it may feel like it's overtaking us. We may feel emptiness. This is something that's not always expected, but I think it's just, you know, in reaction to any sort of traumatic event or big event in our life, it's like we draw inward, you know, to cope with it. We also may have a hard time concentrating. You know, people ask us questions and, you know, it's like, oh, I don't know, you know, we just can't really be present to answer all the time. We may have guilt, or we may feel like we failed in relationship to the deceased. I don't know why this is true, but it's just the human condition that even if we had no reason to think we had anything to do with the person or the animal's death, or, you know, we always come up with this guilt feeling, and we think, oh, I could have done something, I should have done something, or I didn't do enough. And so I just want to say, you know, that is really common. We're kind of going under a review, like, oh, it was too late. I wanted to, you know, I wanted to do such and such. So I'm just going to disclose that my mother passed away early in December. And I was really hoping to see her this summer, because she lives out of state, but she did live out of state, and couldn't get there for various reasons. And so it just felt, you know, like, oh my goodness, I missed that opportunity to see her one final time. But, you know, that's, you know, it's just the way life goes. The next one is appetite loss, or the opposite is that we're overeating. So you probably have experienced this, even when we're stressed or just depressed about other things, it's not even grief, that we will not feel like eating. You know, it's like we can't take in life, or we're just like shoving everything into our mouth without even thinking. You know, I sometimes head to the kitchen when I'm stressed, and, you know, it's like, oh, the gummy bears, where are they? You know, and next thing I know, I've eaten, you know, 25 of them before I realize. Difficulty sleeping, that's a real common response. Another one is wanting to isolate. or the opposite, not wanting to be left alone. So I remember with the death of my mother-in-law, I did not want to be left alone. I didn't want people to talk with me that much, but I just wanted someone to sit in the room with me. That's all that I wanted. So can go either direction on that. And of course we have crying, which is understood. You know, one thing is anger. And we don't talk about anger that much. But there is anger sometimes. And it's okay. We can have anger about something the deceased person did. We can have anger at ourselves. We could have anger at our family members for something that happened 30 years ago. You know, so this brings up a lot of anger, and it actually, I see families, a lot of fighting goes on sometimes. If people don't know how to deal with their grief. And this is where either longstanding family issues, or maybe it's not even longstanding. It was something that happened last week and people start to fight with each other or tell each other things, you know, because we're not handling our emotions very well. And the last one is questioning God or questioning the meaning for life. You know, even if you don't have somebody that you identify as God in your life, we all hopefully have some meaning to our life. But a death just kind of strips us, at least momentarily, where we like, oh, where is God in this? Or what is the meaning of life? And if people can just leave us like this, then, you know, others may draw closer to God, may feel like, okay, we want to, oops, I'm here. We want, you know, to feel that closeness to God. So there's, as you could tell, there's a lot of different reactions to grief. What are some of those reactions that you want to respond to? Maybe that you've experienced, you've noticed other people experience. Maybe there's other reactions that aren't listed here. Does anyone have anything to add?
Say depression.
Depression, yes. Depression, you know, and we try to sometimes distinguish depression from grief, but it's in these early stages. If the death has occurred in the last few months, it's really hard to tease out what is depression and what is grief. So yeah, but okay, good. Any other reactions?
Anxiety from not knowing what to do next, and just the overwhelmingness of it all.
The overwhelmingness, yeah. And feeling like, oh my gosh, what now? What do we do now? It's just a stunner. Sometimes we just feel shocked and stunned. And you know, some of us, you know, we get absorbed. What, you know, what's the right thing to do? You know, some of us have like religious rituals, or, you know, that kind of help guide us, or just regular rituals, you know, that we do. So, yeah. Looks like there's a lot in the chat, but I don't know if any of it pertains to the question.
Yeah, a couple folks said they feel isolation, numbness. They do bargaining.
Bargaining, yeah. Isolation, the numbness is a big one. Yeah, it's kind of related to emptiness, but it's a little bit different, I think. So I don't know if the person that said bargaining, if they want to elaborate at all, if they feel comfortable with doing that, but we can talk about that a bit if you want. Bargaining is down the road too on another slide, so we can address it then. So, okay, anyone else? Any other comments?
Yeah, I did have one comment in the chat that others may want to harm themselves due to the loss of loved ones.
Oh, yes, yes, that's right. You know, sometimes there's a longing to join the person that's died. And that's a normal thing, you know, that intense longing to be there with them. Sometimes there are other issues going on for the person, that they've been having a lot of difficulties in life, and the person's death then is just like, okay, you know, almost like feeling a little bit more permission, like, okay, now I can leave too. Sometimes it's because of a difficult relationship with the person who left. So there's a lot of things that go on, but yes.
Or would it be something like if they want to turn to drugs or alcohol?
Yes, yes, that turning to drugs or alcohol is ultimately a way to tune out. You know, anytime, whether it's grief or loss or problems in our lives, using the drugs or alcohol helps us to either tune out or feel better, but it's only temporary, right? But yeah, that's, people do start using drugs, or they use them more, you know, when there's been a death. Good, you guys are having some good comments here.
I think matters of the heart go deep and wide. It causes me to put my big girl pants on, and there's so many learning lessons that can come out of this. You know, the good news is I have I have a heart, and I feel this stuff if I let myself, if I don't numb out. The bad thing is I have a heart, and I feel a lot of this stuff. And with grief, there's no time clock. You know, sometimes I start crying out of the blue for no reason at all. You know, I could cry over cottage cheese, or, you know, and then sometimes I just, it goes on sometimes for a very long time. It can go on for years. And, you know, I said, okay, I've suffered long enough. But, you know, you can come back now, but it's so final. They're never coming back.
Yes, yes. You know, I don't know that there's any end to grief. You know, I think that there's just that it impacts our life less and less with time. And you're right that, you know, this has different timetables for every person, and every death has different reactions too. So, you know, those who have been the person that died that has had a chronic illness, prolonged illness, you know, that have been suffering, the grief sometimes has begun years ago. And the person also experiences that grief. So it can really, it really varies, and, you know, there's no real prescription for how we should feel, nor what should we do. So, yeah, great. Okay, I think I'm gonna move on. So we got some more things to get through, but thank you all for your comments. So there are many types of losses that create the grief reactions. So we've been talking primarily so far about death. So there's a death of a loved one. I'm going to define this as the human loved ones. There are death of pets. Some people experience pets loss as, just as if they were a family member. So this is an intense loss for them. There's chronic illness, what I was mentioning before, and loss of function. So, if you have Parkinson's or diabetes, cancer, and it's impacting your life so that you can't do the things that you used to do. So you've lost some of the functioning and you need others to help you. And this is a grief. And we don't always look at that, and I think that this does create a whole lot of suffering for us. There's a loss of memory. I've known many very bright people that begin, to lose their memory and have the onset of dementia in those early stages. They are grieving because they know what's ahead, right? And then it's very hard for the loved ones. It's harder on the loved ones actually to see this happening. And then all of a sudden, the person with dementia can't, remember certain things that happened in the past, or, and ultimately sometimes they don't remember who you are. What a grief. It's an intense grief. Loss of a relationship. So with this one, again, I'm talking about living, people that are still living. And I think through the pandemic, we've experienced more of this as we've had great divides in our country. But anyhow, I've always felt like people that were in a relationship, whether it was a marriage or even somebody just dating or partnering, and we have that loss, it's not quite honored in society in the way that death of a human is, right? But this is definitely a grief. Loss of certainty. This is what we have going on right now with the pandemic. There are so many things that are uncertain, and we have new variants coming up. We're told, we need to mask. No, it's okay not to mask. Then we have uncertainty about whether we can work, whether the schools will be functioning, whether there's teachers. This is what I'm hearing right now, that they're hardly able to function because teachers are sick. We don't know whether we're going to get sick, or maybe we've gotten sick, or our loved ones get sick. Just a lot of uncertainty. So again, I'm asking for comments. What other kinds of losses have you experienced or observed?
I have one like say like you not agree, but like what the things like for me when I used to do it just take them all away from and
I'm sorry, we may need to write that in chat because you're coming through garbled.
Oh, you like C3. It's all for you, baby.
So does anyone else? Yeah, I don't know if there's some people that are writing in chat or.
Yes, I have a couple in chat. Cindy, there's loss of income, especially during the public health emergency.
Yes.
Kayla had loss of a pet and friends passing from COVID.
Okay, yeah. Loss of income, that unfortunately some people are experiencing or had experienced. Another one, go ahead, go ahead. Okay. Another loss that I did not list here is a loss of safety.
Hmm.
You know, whether it's safety from a germ or safety from, loss that we are not safe in our homes because people get drunk and become violent. So crime is up, maybe even like there's a loss of safety even being at the store. I don't know for sure if you've experienced that. Somebody is wanting to comment. Jeannie? Did you want to comment, or you were just raising your hand that yes, you've experienced that? I'm not sure, but okay. Anyone else before we move on? Okay, we'll move on then. So grief has its stages and its tasks. And many of you may have heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I think she began with her stages. I can't remember if it was in the 1970s. I mean, it's been quite a few years. I like the idea of tasks of grief. Because we found out after Kubler-Ross defined the stages, or she then realized that they are not in succession, and we thought that initially that they were in succession and you went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? But that's actually not true. But anyhow, and the other thing about the stages is not everyone experiences all of the stages. But I am going to just review them because I think they're still good to realize. The first one is denial, and that's usually the very first thing. I don't know if you all have experienced the denial. It usually occurs the first couple of days after a death or a loss. I'm a mental health professional. I just have to tell you, I experienced it big time. This is my example of denial. My husband came home one day after going to the urgent care, and he sat down. He said they had done an x-ray and it looked like he had lymphoma. It was all throughout his chest. And I'm like, no, that's got to be congestion. Is the x-ray machine working right? And indeed he had lymphoma. And it was like, oh my gosh, I just couldn't take it in. It's our way of protecting ourselves from pain. We have very good, our brains are so good at protecting ourselves from pain. And this, so it has a function, but of course we know that we have to get out of this stage. So the next is anger. And that's just, we all have hopes. We all have ways that we think life should go, and loss just kind of does away with that, right? Whoops, how is this happening? we had, okay. Anyhow, so yeah, we experience that anger at the person, anger at the circumstances, anger at life in general. That just comes up. Then we do the bargaining. If you bring this person back, I don't know, go feed 20 hungry people. That's a very simplistic thing, but we start to think, okay, if we behave in certain ways, that maybe God will bring the person back, or maybe we'll bring another person into our life to replace them or something. So, and then there's the depression, the overwhelming sadness that goes on. And then the final stage is acceptance. So those each have, we may experience all of them in a day. We may experience just one of them through the grief process. So that's why I like the tasks of grief. So this is William Worden. He defined the tasks of grief. And the number one is to accept the reality of the loss. And that's similar to getting past the denial, but just to know, okay, this has really happened. And then we have to experience the pain of the loss. So that's an interesting thing. You think, well, yeah, the loss is painful, but we humans have the ways of bypassing that, right? We don't like pain. So we go the bypass route, whether it's drugs, alcohol, back to denial, or just kind of being not present, dissociative, but we really do need to feel that pain. Then number 3 is adjusting to an environment without the deceased. So we began to do some of that, like, okay, well, my husband's no longer here. He paid the bills. I've got to start paying the bills now. I've got to actually do that task. What am I going to do about the lawn, or other things that he took care of? So it's starting to adjust to that environment. And then the 4th stage, which I really like how this is stated, we withdraw the emotional energy, from the deceased, and we redirect it to other relationships. So it's not like we're forgetting about them, but we have to really get ourselves back involved in life and disconnect to a certain degree, detach to the person who's left, and be involved in other people in their life. Does anyone have questions or comments about these tasks or stages?
I think just knowing to, like what you said, to reiterate, is there's no time limit on grieving. Some people are like, get over it sometimes. And even for a pet, right? And they don't even understand that. They don't know the real relationships they've had. So some people grieve for years. So, I think just be gentle with yourself and knowing that it's going to take time, but really it's on you for how long it might take.
Right. That's a good comment. This is, again, not a time limited process. There aren't like prescriptions for how fast you're supposed to be over it. One of my clients said she just lost her cat, and she said, it feels like, this is a month later now, and she said, it feels like nobody cares that my cat died. I said, well, okay, maybe they haven't had the relationship with your cat that you have. But what they should care about is how you're feeling, that the loss of your cat is big for you, because it was like, she says the cat was like her friend, when she lives alone. So yeah, right. So we can't define for somebody that they should get over it. I think that's, maybe we're frustrated that they're not as available to us, but that's what's behind the comment. But yeah, we do have to be patient. Any other comments?
I think something that I've noticed in relationship to that, not seeming to get over what somebody else thinks of as a relatively minor loss, is that we frequently stuff our feelings of loss over a number of smaller and larger things and push ourselves to keep going and get over it until some final one comes. And it often is the loss of a pet, months or even a year after loss of a spouse or parent. And in between, there's maybe been a job change and a couple other things. And the grief at that final loss, in my example, a pet, seems excessive for what that loss was. But what's actually involved in the grieving is all the preceding losses that were stuffed and not really acknowledged and processed.
That is true. That often, I mean, some people have had major losses or traumas in childhood, and then another loss comes along, and it's like all that grief that was piled up from before but not really expressed comes out. We don't even understand what's happening because we don't remember exactly, the losses that were preceding it. Yeah. Good comment.
There's a comment in the chat, a question in the chat asking, how long is too long to grieve?
Well, that is a good question. I have to say, in the professional world, reading about this, those who have researched grief, they say, if after 6 months somebody is still acutely grieving, that, if they're not functioning, that's an issue. So we look at a 6-month marker, like, okay, somebody's starting to function, but again, I would hate to put that prescription on anyone, so there is a sense of, there's prolonged grieving or chronic mourning. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, when that does become a problem. And that's when, what we look at a person's life is their overall functioning. Is something a problem? Okay. So are they able to get to work if they need to work? Are they able to do the activities of daily living? Are they engaging in relationships? Are they numbed out or using drugs, alcohol? So it's like looking at the big picture, and and then you have to look at the backdrop of culture. You have to look at the backdrop of how the family, thinks that you should be. I mean, there's just so many factors in this. So, but I think the key thing is, how is the person functioning? Is that interfering with their functioning? Does that make sense? Okay. Well, let me see. Maybe we should move on, or maybe one more question or comment. Is there anything else in the chat or?
Got a couple. One is I've seen three types of different grievances with my own family and distant relatives. it's all different too, hard to communicate with 2 out of the 3. Another person said, holistically, all the stages of grief can affect us physically. And then Al said, yes, I think not isolating during the time is good. You need to talk about it and have that support.
Yes, agree with all the comments. And the person, I think they were saying about the three grievances, that there are different ways that people are grieving. I think that's what that was about. So
yes,
yeah, noticing that everybody it grieves differently. Years ago, I'd understood that men and women grieve differently, or men and women deal with stress differently. Sometimes men get involved in doing, they want to problem solve, they want to get out there, and we women are talkers, so we want to process it, verbally. So, allowing, but see, this is a broad sweep, generalization, and there are some men that like to talk and some women that like to do, and so you don't want to necessarily think that's always going to occur either. Okay, I think I'm going to move on. We're down to about 15 minutes, I think, or less. So this is where I was saying that grief varies by the individual, by the family, by the culture and the religion. Our society, our culture, our religion may define this by the rituals and practices. So there's a lot of differences in religious practices and cultural practices. I did hear of one really, really unique one, but I think I won't share it right now. I'll see if anyone wants to share anything about practices or rituals. One thing that, I've understood is the Irish, are celebratory after a death. I mean, they, I guess, go through the mass, the Catholic mass usually, but then it's like, we're, gonna drink and party, and celebrate the person's life. That's not something that typically is done here, although I have heard of some people doing that. So that's, and some religions or cultures is really, quiet and not talking about things, and they may have some rituals, but yeah. So anyone have something unique to share? Or is there anything in chat?
I say, like, for us Native Americans, when we, like, for the Navajos and stuff, when we have like a death in the family, how we grieve and stuff, it's like, we stay straight for 4 days, and like after we throw away our family member away, and after when we're done putting them down to the ground, then we wait another 4 more days. Then we can't take a shower, or we can't, we can't do anything. After the 4 days and stuff, we just end up, we cleanse ourselves, like, wash up and everything, and pray and stuff, and we end up kind of like staying up all night with family. It's just like a immediate family, or whenever people want to come over to hang out with us. That's how we grieve in our tradition. That's all I want to share with you and stuff.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I know there some people like, they have the parade almost like with the deceased person on top of a oh, I don't know what they call it, but you know, and they take it like as if they were a king or queen and down, you know, and so like Bali, Indonesia, some of the societies just have some unique practices. Here in the United States, a lot of times we're trying to get the body out of sight. You know, we're whisking it away to the funeral home. And there's another tribe in Indonesia, though, that keeps the body with the family for a year, which I thought was a really unique thing. And I don't know how I feel about that, but that's what they do. So, yeah. But just so we know, we need to be respectful of other people's practices. But the pandemic has created a lot of alterations. You know, now a lot of people are having to die alone in the hospital without family present. Or they're saying their goodbyes over the phone. It's just really, really altered this for us. And then our funerals or memorials or ceremonies are sometimes on Zoom because we can't get there, or, you know, there's a COVID wave going on. And so this is a whole different thing, and our connections are by technology. So this is a kind of a loss, another loss in our society. Yeah, and then just again, back to the stages, there's, you know, stages of grief. You can have one stage that you're in for a month. There's no succession to the stages of grief. So yeah, whatever you're experiencing, you're just experiencing, and just sort of honoring that. I think I'm going to keep going. So when does grief become a problem? This began to be addressed. So I'm going to talk about two issues with grief. One is prolonged grief and one is complex grief. I just want to say that, again, you know, sometimes when we throw up symptoms, you know, we can get kind of latched onto this as like, oh my gosh, I'm having a problem, or someone else is having a problem. I just want to say that you may not be, but these are some things that we look at, you know, and in some ways I don't even want to go over this just because I don't want you to latch on to it like, oh, okay, this person or myself, I'm definitely having a problem. But the inability to trust others means there's, you know, a problem going on. You know, having bitterness about the loss, real anger that kind of lingers. I mean, we can feel that initially, but if it's lingering, you know, into a year, 2, 3, you know, then that can, you know, we can be stuck in the chronic mourning. They think about 10% of people are kind of stuck in chronic mourning. So I don't know. It's like if you're having thoughts about the deceased person just still, you know, daily, and they've been gone for 3, 4, 5 years, maybe you're not really moving on then as much. I don't know. I mean, these are, yeah, so I'm going to move on from these two, but I just, you know, you're going to get a handout afterwards about with most of the things on this PowerPoint, so that you can just take a look at this and see if you think there's an issue with it. I want to talk a little bit more though about complex or complicated grief. Because I think, they think that maybe 7 or 10% of people are experiencing this. This type of grief, there's an enduring, it keeps going, the psychological or physical dysfunction. And I want to tell you about some of the factors, why this happens. So one of the factors is that we have mental health or substance abuse issues before the death. So that then the death just kind of complicates things, and it usually will worsen the substance use or worsen the depression or bipolar disorder, whatever we experience. But this complicated grief also happens when there's a difficult type of death. And by this, I mean, like if somebody is murdered, or if somebody suicided, or somebody was in a car accident. Those are difficult deaths. And that can lead us to some complications in our grieving process. We also have complicated grief sometimes if we've had multiple deaths. I've run into people that had 3 or 5 people die within a year that they were close to. That's a lot. That's hard to take, Then, another complication is if we've had a difficult relationship with the deceased. Not all of our relationships go well. And a lot of times at a funeral, memorial service, or whatever it is, we don't talk about that. We're busy talking about how good the person was, but not everything is so rosy. And you can feel left behind or not, if they're talking about all the good things the person, or who they are, and yet you didn't have a good relationship with that person. That just feels weird. So those are some of the reasons. Then looking at, okay, what are some of the symptoms of having a complex grief? You're hypersensitive, you're to any separation or loss. That's when, later down the road, when you lose a pet, it's like, it's like huge. But any separation or loss is just like, it feels like a lot. You're feeling anxiety, but you're trying to suppress it. I mean, I remember as a kid, my family did not want us expressing emotions, right? It's just the way the Northern European, German, Russian people, it's like, you don't express emotions. I had that lump in my throat in funerals, it's just like sitting there, and I was like anxious because I had the lump in my throat, and you're just feeling horrible. Third thing is anxious about one's own death, or you're feeling like, oh, everybody's going to die. Oh my gosh, you start to suspect that yourself or everyone else is going to die. That's okay. I mean, we all are going to, but most of us are not imminently dying, right? So when we have obsessions or compulsions about the deceased, some people are like, okay, I've got to go to my mother's ashes, and I've got to, spin them around 5 times, say a prayer, and that might be okay, but it may get in the way. I'm looking at the time, and we're about out of time here. So engaging in, I'm just going to quickly go over engaging in self-sabotaging relationships, avoiding others, substance abuse, numbness, not feeling like you're real, and then depression symptoms. So what can we do to cope with grief? So on the right side of this is getting back to normal. Those are the normal things of life. Get back to your routines, your structures, eat regularly, eat nutritiously as much as you can, get the extra rest you need it. And then get back to school or work or whatever things that you're doing. Processing the loss, these are just some suggestions, but communicating with other survivors, feeling that sense of community. It was so neat for me to reconnect with a high school friend after my mother died. She knew my mother. It was just really helpful to me. If you want to journal, journal some, but don't spend the whole day journaling, just a limited amount of time. Get the rituals going, whether they're your own religious rituals or whether rituals that you think you want to do. Forgiving the faults of a loved one. Forgiveness is a very important concept. We have to forgive ourselves. We have to forgive others. It's a complicated task, but just set it as a goal. Teens and children need to know they didn't cause the loss. Strategy also allow for grieving time every day. When you're at work, you can't cry. When you're on the phone with somebody, sometimes when I've been in this situation, I'll tell myself, okay, I'm going to get home and then I'm going to have time to grieve and cry. And, it's like setting aside that time, using humor. It's not irreverent. So these are deeply personal strategies, but just, it acknowledges the loss. It helps all of us to kind of feel like we're getting back ourselves, we're getting back our life. We need time to reflect. We need to focus on the loss and then focus on current life. We need that back and forth, back and forth. Okay, I'm feeling the loss. I want back to current life. We absolutely need the support or companionship of others. Absolutely. And then we need to do those things that give us a positive feeling. So these are some very specific suggestions that I found. And then I ending with quotes. Gratitude helps with both depression and grief. Ellie Weasel says, no one is capable of gratitude as one who has emerged from the kingdom of the night. I can't see the name on my screen, but I still miss those I loved who are no longer with me, but I am, gratitude has finally come. Anyhow, I'm going to stop. I don't know whether we have 5 extra minutes. Dana, you need to take over. I'm sorry that we had to rush through this last bit, but thank you so much for your comments and questions. It's very helpful.
Thank you, Cindy. Yes, thank you everyone for joining. We don't want to keep anyone longer than they need to. However, if anyone wants to stay on for a couple extra minutes, if they have pertinent questions that you feel like you need to ask, feel free. But for anyone who needs to go, we already went a few minutes over, so we understand we want to be wary of people's time. But even if you think of questions afterwards, you're welcome to email them to me. I'll put my email in the chat. I think several of you also have connections to Valerie Sosi. You're welcome to also send any questions you may have to her, and we'll try to do our best in getting those answers for you. As Cindy mentioned, I'll be sending out a handout that has a lot of this information that Cindy provided in the presentation. I'll be emailing it after the session ends today, so you'll get that via email. So, but thank you all for coming. I will send out the recording in case anyone wants to rewatch it. But thank you all. I hope everyone learned a lot. Thank you, Cindy, for doing this for us. We really appreciate you being a guest presenter for us today.
Yes, thank you so much for coordinating this, and thank you all for coming and contributing. So it's
Thank you, Cindy.
okay.
Thank you
Enjoy
so
your
much.
evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. It's nice meeting you.
Nice
Meeting you guys.
you. Yes.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. I can't see who's saying, but yes, you're welcome.
He's just in the dark. Can't see.
Okay, yeah, now I stopped the sharing so I can like see more of you. Does anyone else have a quick question or?
I
Not
don't
me.
see any questions
I'm
in the
just gonna
chat.
read the chat.
Okay. Thank you, Jeannie.
All right, you guys enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you all to the new folks that joined us for the first time, and thank you to everyone that's a returning person. But thank you all. Hope everyone has a good Thursday, and we hope to see you in future classes.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys have a good afternoon.
Bye.